Okay, so basically, to a little bit of how to highlight this. Near the end of the series, a whole lot of the machinations of the bad guys will be dived into a little bit more because for Uplift Protocol, a lot of the like aha I see moments, a fair amount of that is going to happen in the last book because well, let's just say I took a look at what they did with Babylon Squared there, and like how Sinclair was able to affect things through his own loop. Um, there's also, they don't quite realize that Eliza's doing certain things that for to relate to the last book. I mean, I don't want to say too much, just because for those that care about spoilers, you'll be able to see where my whole onion is working towards. That's the reason why I wrote the ending first. It's like, and then how would that ending be achieved? Now, part of the a little bit of the onion right there was also revealed in the capper for season 1. That, and ultimately, part of Aether's people, the Juka, their tech was abused in a certain way, but that will also be revealed a bit later, because I decided early on that most of the good guy races would have like one big flub that they did that helped create the whole unity situation, and in that way it's about the good guys like redeeming themselves like from genuine mistake. That's personally a theme I wanted to see in my own series. But yeah, Draco, you're right. I don't focus on the bad guys as much right now, is because a lot of the stuff that they're doing right now would spoil a fair amount for the last book in the series. Already, based on the outline, the last book of the series is easily going to have like 50 chapters or more, depending on how the different various subplots develop and play out. Because even though I have a good outline for the whole series, breaking them all down into chapters, it's like, should I move this more towards the next book? That sort of thing. And I personally think, like, if you're gonna do what I'm doing, where you have all these cosmic powers that are playing this big game of chess, it doesn't have to be even complicated chess, but sometimes to just have the reaction from the baseline, frontline people will help a writer, kind of hide a little bit more of the overall meta arc. Again, this is just how I perceive things, but that's also the difference between different kinds of stories. Me personally, even when I was doing tabletop stuff, I would always key in not so much the extreme personal level on characters, but I would often take a look at like what's the big overarching part. Like, my curiosity was always mostly there, like, how is this going to affect the whole entire process versus just the ground level stuff. Now, I know some writers usually build from the ground up, but I kind of built from the sky down. So that it's just another little thing. I don't even know what to call this. It's probably just called another onion episode. But your comments on mine's definitely, you are catching on to things that I want people to notice. And also my whole thing with the bad guys, since they're the instigators, I kind of want their movements a little bit more masked. Where they're not so much like masked in terms that the heroes don't know what's going on. Some of them, have a pretty good idea what's going on. But in a way, each side can't play their hand too early, kind of like how the Shadows and Vorlons couldn't play their hand too early, but then the big smackdown happened in season 4, to where it's like, what happens if those cosmic powers don't care anymore about that? That's the reason why a lot of this stuff is going to be building up to that, to where the younger races are going to have to defend themselves. But that's also the reason why certain things are hiding the way they are, because, say, like, for example, what if basically Sheridan and his crew had started encountering the first ones much, much sooner, but they were able to hide it for longer from the Shadows and the Vorlons. What if there was more Lorians out there that were like, oh, we made a big mistake in the past and we have to correct it in the future, but this is kind of how we're going to do it. So, it's like different themes that from things I've enjoyed, but I am very much, pie in the sky, like bird looking down, where it's like, what's the big overall web versus, let's build this from the foundation up. I just go in the opposite direction. It pretty much kind of inverted, which is just fine. I mean, it just depends on how you want to write and what you want to focus on. And part of another reason why I don't have as much focus on the villains just yet, besides the plot reasons, is another reason is like me personally, I've never really connected with the villain characters as much. And just like with Narnia, you'll have a villain that represents, a very obvious kind of sin or vice or something. And yeah, she ends up losing in the end, the White Witch and everything. But the handful of scenes that she was in the book, she was pretty effective. And that's another thing, though, too, is what you caught on with that Minds post about. Yes, it's very much they don't want to crash and burn everything, because a lot of the bad guys, they want to become the next big thing where, say like even with Star Warden where, Demios controls so much stuff, each of my villains want to eventually become that, but they don't want to, waste the infrastructure. Some don't want to do it because they think that's like, they're being merciful somehow. And some of the others would be like, oh, that's a waste of like scientific potential. Or something like that. That's the reason why the sleeper programs were put into place, because Kronos wanted, from his end with his sleepers, he wants to do just a simple cause and effect kind of testing. What I did with Kronos is he's basically, what if a scientist didn't have any kind of moral or ethical obligations, and they were just there to test things and just see how stuff turns out. That's the basic simple thing for him. The only kind of thing he worships, besides the proven concept according to him of unity, is I trust the science. That's the reason why he doesn't understand what regular people go through. And later on, this is more for season 3, you'll get to see a bit of how Hillary grew up and what happened to her mother. But it's just like with anything else. I just want to reveal some of these things in spurts. I mean, I still want to make the action and everything go pop, 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 because that's what I prefer. But as far as revealing certain other kinds of information, I just don't want to dump it all at once. But yeah, I didn't really want to have the villains take up the lion's share of stuff. I see them, again, mostly as instigators, where they get the ball rolling, and the heroes have to react to them. But once you see book 12 roll along, you'll understand just how much stuff the Juka, Aether, the Earthstone, and how much of a cat's paw Eliza herself is, to where it's like, okay, they need me to do this. That's the reason why when you see in that interlude at the end of season 1, that's an Eliza that knows what the full picture is. Kind of like Sinclair as Valen, knew what a good majority of the picture was, even when he had to travel, to the past to do it. Well, I took a different route where this Eliza, after certain events, travels to the far future, and I was thinking, not so much that she interacts with that future much. There's a certain plot you can see it from the end of the season 1 thing, but if you haven't gotten that far, but you can see from that particular setup, it's like, okay, so that's like kind of like that moment where you see Sinclair take off that helmet, and it's an older version of him because they're leaping forward and he's aging because of it, because he had been affected by the field in season 1, you know, again, it's just because a lot of these different books and everything else that I've enjoyed have given me a lot of ideas. Like, but what if this happened instead, or that went in this direction? But as far as the bad guys in my series, I take a more of a Lord of the Rings approach, where the bad guys weren't focused in on as much. Tolkien highlighted them when he needed to be like a little bit of a compare and contrast to the heroes. But a lot of that stuff, again, won't come into play until the later seasons. Because for me, season 1 was like about springboarding stuff, and there's some stuff that will carry over into other seasons. And that's also the reason why I'm releasing this as a serial, so people can see it as it goes along. But I'm not going to be, doing a lot of re-editing or formatting and all that stuff until I'm completely done. It's just the way I want to set it up. But I understand that some readers would rather have like the villains front and center a lot of times. But for me, it really is about this family discovering, in their groups of friends, discovering all these, big level cosmic secrets. And if you read in between the lines, you can start to pick up some hints of where certain things are going. But yeah, I plan on having book 12 explain a whole lot of stuff that's going on, and I even put hints of it even way back into book 0. Because, again, I'm taking a lot of cues from Babylon 5 in terms of like how a lot of the story elements, how those played out, where you plant seeds in the very beginning, and then sometimes you won't see the effects of some of those things until near the conclusion of the series. But in Babylon 5's case, there was a lot of different stuff that hit in other seasons where the payoff might have happened in season 2, but the setup was in season 1. Or the setup was in season 1 and it didn't pay off until like season 3. Again, it's just my personal preference. I like seeding things and then having it grow and then having it pay off itself later. God. Yeah, let me take a look at my notes. But to kind of get a little bit more of a track, when I looked at Lord of the Rings and I saw how Gollum was set up, it's like, that's an effective villain, air quote, in its own right. He wasn't redeemed in the end. In fact, he was able to have one last moment with his precious before, being completely decimated. And my takeaway from that is, like, you can use a lesser evil to KO the greater evil. So, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, with these villains, they all have a very clear goal in mind. They do. But what if they thought each other was the Sauron, but in reality, they're all golems, They want the precious, precious power, even Set, they want that precious power of unity, but in the end, they're all lesser evils that will help KO the greater evil. Whether it's through their own actions or anything else like that. The plot point of Mordred is going to come up again. A fair amount of the villain's storylines will take maybe 30 to 40%. I want to say around the middle of season 2. Mainly because when initially setting up Uplift Protocol, I did wanted to focus on the good guys as the lion's share. You'll see a little bit more of Arthenon and his stuff later on, because again, I'm setting this up as, here's the primary plot threads. This is what I wanted to introduce with season 1. Like, here's the primary stuff I want to introduce with season 2. And then a lot of these threads are going to start tying together and crisscrossing in season 3 and season 4. Which is why most likely those latter seasons are probably going to have longer books based on all my outlines here. And again, I try to leave stuff open in case something else might hit me suddenly, and it's like, oh, I want to add this either as something to be, add something lighthearted to it or something that'll help tie the main story together. But I always want to leave at least some room open, some wiggle room, so that way, the story, while structured, I would say like 20% of it is like stuff I also think of like in addition to while I'm stuck at work. Because quite honestly, sometimes my job, since it is so mundane and everyday, sometimes it's easier to focus my mind in on more fantastical things, and that's why I always have my notebook with me. Like I got a little pocket notebook so I can write things down. But yeah, it's just again how you want to write stuff. Some people do want to focus more on the ground level format and then slowly climb up those stairs to where it's like boom, like here's the upper level of that whole meta plot. Like I said earlier, my meta plot, I'm looking at it from above and then going down to the ground level. It's just the way it's just the way my brain likes to analyze things. Whether I'm watching movies or other things with Dad or reading other books, I'm like, I always try to key in, like, first and foremost, what's the big overarching plot? Even for example, when I was reading some more stuff with Lord of the Rings, it's like the histories and everything are nice, and that's what the appendix section's for, to help expand on that. But every chapter I read, I'm like, how I like to look for clues of how, like, how does this tie into the big main plot? And another cue I took from Lord of the Rings and even Narnia is big evil tries to move in the background, tries to remain unnoticed. But usually if there's enough watchdogs on the scene, they'll be able to be like, ooh, I see something over here. Like, whenever I introduced a character that, if they don't ever get a name, then most likely it's just there to be like, hi, it's a little sprinkling of exposition, or like maybe a reaction or like a general reaction to something. But if I happen to go through later and actually name that character, then that means they're going to have some sort of plot point further along. Because I thought that, Babylon 5 used its guest people pretty well. They helped get plot points across, and then some of them showed up later for other plot points. You just never know. That's the reason why I look back through my list. It's like, okay, which characters that I've already introduced can help me build up this plot point for Season 2? Or, say, this plot point for Season 4? So, yeah, sometimes, even if it doesn't look like it's important, I try not to introduce anything that I don't think will help tie into that big main meta plot. So yeah, that's about it for today, guys. What do you guys think? Do you like to build from the top down or build from the ground up? See you later.